another episode of Inside the Bag. I'm Ahmed Gafir here with Mason Viner once again. And today we have a special guest with us, with Kyle Stackpole from CBS Sports joining us to talk about some of our future pro terps. Maryland wrapped up their pro day last week, and they sent seven to the NFL Combine last month, so we'll get a chance to dive into their prospects and their impact. Kyle, I appreciate you taking some time with us today, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. I gotta rep Maryland. I got Xfinity Center behind me, so all about the Terps, man.
There you go. There you go. Well, I don't know that we can talk about the pro Terps without starting off with Deontay Banks and Jacorian Bennett. Both of them obviously blew expectations out of the water, stole the show with their 40 times. It's looking increasingly likely that Banks finds himself in the first round, probably one of the first 3 or 4 cornerbacks taken off the board. But dating back to the 2021 season, we heard a lot about NFL scouts loving Deontay Banks, but just kind of, pitching to you, what kind of sticks out about Deontay, and I guess what kind of makes him, in your mind, that first round prospect?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the athleticism, which was something that you saw at the NFL Combine with him and Bennett. I think we did a story. It was like were they the most athletic pair of teammates at the Combine ever? And because they just absolutely crushed it. They were both, top 3 in almost every category, every single drill. So I think that just kind of confirmed that he has the athletic skill set. And then on tape, you can see the physicality. He's a good tackler. He only missed, one tackle last year. He doesn't have necessarily the ball production that you would want. And I think that's like the piece that's missing. But that's something where, as he goes into the NFL, he gets more coaching. He refines his technique. All the physical tools are there to really develop into a number 1 corner. And I think the reason he was kind of more off people's radar going into the Combine was because of the traits, and then he compared it to all the other top guys, like Joey Porter Jr. and Cam Smith. He tested a lot better than those guys. So all of a sudden he finds himself, as you said, top 4 or 5 cornerbacks. It's looking like he's going to go in, I would say the back third of the first round. My most recent mock draft, I have him going to the Vikings, but he could also land with the Giants. He could land with the Steelers, maybe the Commanders if he goes in the top 16. So I think there's a lot of teams in the back half of that first round that could really use a cornerback. And there's not that Christian Gonzalez has kind of established himself as a number 1 guy, but there's not that. I mean, there's not Sauce Gardner, because there's hardly ever Sauce Gardner in that kind of class, but there's not even really a Derek Stingley, I wouldn't say. So it's a good class, but it's not as top heavy. So I think you're going to see a lot more guys go from the 10 to 30 range. And I think Banks is definitely going to be one of those guys.
Kyle, when you look at a defensive back evaluation, Maryland's a team that struggled really getting any pressure on the quarterback. How much does that factor in? The Terps, overall as a defensive unit, have really struggled, not necessarily this past year, but in years prior.
Yeah, I think it puts a lot more pressure on the corners, because if you're not getting pressure, you have to cover for a lot longer. And that's actually something that's a great point you bring up, because I don't think enough people think about it that way. You could have certain defensive backs, they're at a school where, like, Alabama, you have Will Anderson coming off the edge and you only have to cover for a couple seconds. Whereas, as you said, Maryland struggles to get pressure. So that is a real thing. And I'm curious how NFL teams view that when they're watching tape of, hey, he's had to cover for an average of X amount of seconds, where another cornerback on another team has only had to cover for this long. So I think that it only bodes well for Banks and Jacorian Bennett, just because they're used to having to cover for longer because the quarterback might be scrambling around. So I think it might be a welcome when they go to the NFL and they realize that, oh, hey, I don't have to cover for maybe as long as I did in college.
Yeah, that makes sense completely. And on the other side of the ball, I'm not sure how many Maryland fans expected the wide receivers to be the lowest among the the drafted guys with the cornerbacks obviously going, probably day one, day two. But Maryland does have three wide receivers eligible for the 2023 NFL draft, and Raheem Jarrett, Jacob Copeland, Dante Demas. And in my opinion, I think Rack is a guy that I think, obviously he struggled with the drops, but I think he was able to kind of flash some things as a blocking receiver. So I think he could, depending on the right fit, be a guy that kind of latches on. But curious to just get your perspective on Dante Demas. Obviously, I think, fans were able to kind of see glimpses and flashes in the 21 season. And then obviously as he battled his way back into the 22 season, he's a guy now, got a chance to watch him at Pro Day, and obviously he got a chance to flash at the combine. He looks a lot more healthy and a lot more fluid in his motion. So I'm curious to see, hear your perspective on maybe how much of the last year's injuries kind of are affecting his draft stock, and then how much of it is, hey, this is a 6'4" receiver at the end of the day that can run a lot of these routes for us.
Yeah, I think the injury definitely is going to affect his draft stock, because he was, I remember watching that Iowa game when the first couple games of the season, he was just cooking, and then that injury just kind of changed everything. But like you said, he's, 6'4", he's absolutely chiseled as a receiver. He's your ideal, down the field, go up and get it. And I think he's going to be someone that is not going to get drafted until day 3, could be, 5th, 6th rounder. But if you have the right team and they realize that, hey, he did suffer this injury, and while it did take him a while to come back, he's looked a lot better throughout this draft process. So they're drafting him on his potential rather than what they've seen in the past year and a half. So I think he's someone, he has to, get better at the contested catches. And he doesn't really have a ton of speed, but he has that frame you're looking for. And he's someone that someone could get late in day 3 that you look up in a couple of years, and he's a, solid number, 2, 3 receiver on some teams. So he's an interesting prospect because he has been through a lot, and he showed the highs of highs, but the injury really cast some doubt on him. So hopefully he's able to overcome that and revert back to what he was before the injury.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And just, just kind of a follow up between, among those 3 guys, I guess, do you feel like there's a guy that, among them you maybe like the most, or a guy that you feel like maybe could kind of surpass their expectations on draft night?
Yeah, I think at least in our rankings that are actually, I think we're updating them today. We have Jarrett first, Copeland second, Demas third, actually. And I would say Jarrett would be the clear cut number 1 for me. He definitely wasn't as consistent as maybe you would have hoped for at Maryland, but his flashes were incredible. And his start to his Maryland career was great. And he's someone who has all the tools. He's pretty young. He's only 22 years old. I think he's someone where, kind of along with Deonte Banks, he has the physical skill set. If he can get some, coaching, some refinement, if he can improve on that consistency, he has what it takes to create separation in the NFL consistently, and really show that those flashes at Maryland weren't just a fluke, and that he can really do that on a, game-to-game basis. So I would say he would be the one to watch for, just because of what he brings, speed, route running, all those kind of things.
You had 2 guys that came back to Maryland to build their draft stock on the offensive line, Spencer Anderson and Jalen Duncan. Duncan, another player, floated, coming into the year, that if he had a great season, he could be a day 1 pick. Anderson, kind of the same story. He could have really boosted his draft stock, but both of those players didn't really happen for them. Where do they sit coming down the stretch of the draft?
Yeah, it was interesting because in a lot of our mock drafts during the season, Jalen Duncan did find himself in the back half of the first round. And now that he's fallen back, he's more looked at as a day 2 guy. But I still think he's someone who he has what it takes to be a solid starting offensive lineman in the NFL. He has plenty of experience, 4-year starter. He's great working in space. He would really work well in a zone scheme in the NFL. And he has great athleticism. He has good footwork. I think one of the big knocks on him, he wasn't consistent enough on tape. And then another thing is lacking the physicality and maybe the nastiness to kind of finish guys off, which is really what you want to see in an offensive tackle. You want them to just, latch onto someone and just bury them. And he hasn't he didn't really show that as much as you would hope, but he has what it takes. He has the physical tools to be a plus, whether it's a tackle. They could move him inside the guard as well. But so he maybe didn't have the season that he wanted to, but teams are going to draft him on potential. And while that is likely not going to be a first round pick, I would be surprised if he didn't go off the board in day 2.
And one question, just because, obviously I know he's a guy that has, with his brother in the league, has definitely drawn some headlines. But one guy who will be back in College Park next year, and we'll hope to hear his name called in the 2024 draft, is obviously Talia Tagovailoa, who returns for a 4th season. And, I think kind of going into really the 2021 and 22 season, I think the expectation going in was that, this would probably be the last season and Talia would move on, look to the pros. And, now he's going into year 4 as a college quarterback. And I think the obvious knock on him is obviously his size, where, 5'10", 5'11", it's just a little bit tough. But I am curious, just kind of coming into year 4 now and seeing what we've seen already on tape, beyond the size limitations. Do you feel that Talia would need to kind of do anything, or kind of prove anything on the field or show anything on film to maybe kind of solidify himself as a potential NFL QB?
Yeah, I think the size, it's for smaller QBs, it's kind of nice how the NFL is almost transitioning, because you are getting more college guys that are smaller that are coming to the draft and actually performing pretty well. And I mean, Bryce Young he's a unicorn basically, but everyone's talking about his size, but he doesn't get balls batted down. He plays like he's taller. So I think those things benefit the smaller quarterbacks like Talia, because it's less seen of, hey, you have to be X height to be an NFL quarterback, or else we're not even going to draft you, or you're just going to be a backup. We'll draft you, 6th, 7th round. But I think with Talia, it's more just about consistency and putting it all together. And I think he probably made a smart decision coming back to school, just knowing, talking to his coaches, knowing where his game is at, knowing that, let me get one more year in the system. Let me really put myself in the best position to get drafted, because you can come out early and you realize you're maybe not ready, or you're not performing to your utmost potential. And that really limits you as a quarterback, because now you're a second QB, a third QB, maybe you're bouncing around training camps and you can't catch on to a roster. So I think for someone who is going to, be a late round pick, he wants to make sure he's putting himself in the best position. And I think it's just really providing more consistency and, just being sharp in a lot of different aspects of the game to put himself in the best position going into next year.
That makes complete sense. We're joined by Kyle Stackpole from CBS Sports, and we talked about the Pro Terps. Kyle, let us know where listeners can find you. Plug us in.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Kyle F. Stackpole. Don't tweet as much as I used to, but still I'm tweeting a bunch of CBS Sports content. We have 3 really great NFL draft analysts, Ryan Wilson, Chris Trapasso, Josh Edwards. You can find all their work at cbssports.com/NFL draft. We actually are coming out, we're expanding our rankings to the top 400 today. So if you're really looking for those deep sleepers, we got grades on them, and we have a lot of great info. But yeah, thanks for, letting me hop on. It's an exciting time for Maryland to have this many guys that are going to get drafted, and to have someone that is likely to go in the first round. And hopefully that pipeline can continue and can lead to some more success on the field in college, and not just translate to the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see if Maryland's able to get another defensive back selected in the first round. Would be, I believe, the second or third in the last couple of years. So, yeah, it will be fun stuff, exciting times, and make sure everyone gives them a follow with the NFL draft right around the corner. That's it for Inside the Bag this week. Make sure to like and follow us below. Kyle, appreciate you taking some time with us as we wait to see where the former Terps land beginning April 27th when the NFL draft begins.
Thanks for having me.